He was a soldier who lost everything: his family, his faith, and his reason to keep going, alone in the desert, haunted by the ghosts of war. Until one night, a cry for help changed his life forever. A wounded nurse, a storm of fire, and a loyal German shepherd who would give everything to save them both. In that moment, when death was only a breath away, the wind swept low across the Nevada desert, carrying with it the scent of dust and rusted iron. The twilight burned red against the horizon, fading slowly into indigo. In that half-light, the desert looked like an endless graveyard of forgotten battles, and Jack Turner had long felt like one of its ghosts. Jack was a man carved from hard years, 45, tall, broad-shouldered, his frame still bearing the rigid discipline of a Marine. His once dark hair had begun to gray at the temples, cropped short out of habit rather than vanity. A thin scar ran from his left temple down to the edge of his jaw, a pale reminder of a roadside bomb in Helmand Province that had nearly taken his sight. His eyes were steel gray, always watchful, the kind that saw too much and felt too little. There was a quiet weight to him, a gravity that made most people speak softer in his presence. He lived alone on the edge of nowhere, in a weather-beaten house that leaned into the wind like a tired soldier. The porch boards creaked beneath his boots as he moved through the motions of another solitary evening, feeding Rex, checking the generator, tightening bolts on the old truck he'd rebuilt from scrap. He didn't speak much anymore. He had learned that silence was safer than memory. Rex, his companion, was a 4-year-old German shepherd with a thick sable coat and intelligent amber eyes. The dog had once been part of a K-9 unit before being retired after an injury. His right ear carried a small scar from shrapnel, but he still moved with sharp precision, alert, loyal, patient. With Jack, he was more than a dog. He was a lifeline. At night, when nightmares clawed their way into Jack's sleep, it was Rex's quiet breathing beside his bed that pulled him back. Inside the small living room, the air smelled faintly of machine oil and burnt coffee. A framed photo sat on the mantel, Jack's wife, Sarah, and their daughter Lily, frozen forever in sunlight and laughter. Sarah had been a nurse, soft-spoken but stubborn, with auburn hair that used to catch the light like fire. Lily, only 8 when the accident happened, had her mother's smile and Jack's restless eyes. Their deaths, in a crash caused by a drunk driver while Jack was overseas, had broken something in him that war never could. He poured a splash of whiskey into his coffee, the bitterness fitting the taste of memory. Outside, thunder murmured in the distance, a rare sound in the desert. Jack glanced toward the horizon, where dark clouds gathered like bruises. The desert storms here came fast and mean, as if the sky itself wanted to tear open old wounds. He leaned under the hood of his truck, tightening a loose valve, when Rex suddenly lifted his head. The dog's ears pricked, his body going rigid. Jack froze. "What is it, boy?" Rex let out a low growl, deep and warning. Then came the sound, faint but sharp. The echo of an explosion, followed by the dull whoosh of something, burning. Jack dropped the wrench. Instinct took over before thought could catch up. He grabbed his flashlight, slung his old military jacket over his shoulders, and whistled sharply. "Come on, Rex!" They drove fast down the dirt road, the truck's headlights cutting through sheets of windblown sand. The sound of the storm grew louder, mixing with the rhythmic rattle of the engine. Jack's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the surge of something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. After 5 miles, he saw it. A car overturned in a dry wash, smoke curling from its engine. Flames licked the sand around it, reflecting off shards of shattered glass. He braked hard, jumped out, and Rex followed, barking sharply. "Stay close," he ordered. The heat hit him instantly, and through the haze of smoke, he saw movement inside the car. A woman was trapped behind the steering wheel, struggling weakly. Her hair was dark and matted with blood, her face pale against the flicker of firelight. Jack yanked at the crumpled door. It wouldn't budge. He stepped back, kicked near the handle once, twice, and it gave. He reached in, ignoring the searing heat of the metal. "I've got you," he said, voice low but commanding. Her eyelids fluttered, dazed. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "They're coming back." Jack froze for half a second. "Who?" Before she could answer, gunfire cracked in the distance, 2 short bursts. Rex barked, snapping his head toward the sound. Jack didn't hesitate. He unbuckled her seatbelt and pulled her free. cradling her against his chest. She was light, trembling, and her breaths came shallow. He carried her to the truck and laid her across the back seat. "Hang on," he said. The woman tried to speak, but her eyes rolled back, and she slumped unconscious. Jack started the engine, turned the truck around, and floored the gas. For the next few miles, he kept glancing into the rearview mirror, expecting headlights to appear, but none did. The storm broke open, rain slicing through the dust, thunder rolling like artillery. By the time he reached his cabin, the wind was howling. Inside, he laid the woman on the old couch and switched on a lantern. She was young, maybe 30, with olive skin and long black lashes against bruised cheeks. Dirt and blood smeared her clothes, once a pale blue nurse's uniform now torn and burned at the edges. Her left arm was twisted unnaturally. Jack checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. "Rex, first aid kit," he said, and the dog padded obediently to the cabinet. Jack's voice softened without his meaning to. "Good boy?" He cleaned the wound on her forehead, wincing at the memory of field hospitals and dying friends. When he touched her arm, she groaned, half conscious. "You're safe," he murmured. "No one's gonna hurt you here." The lantern light flickered over his face, hard lines, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and something deeper, something like guilt. He wrapped her arm in a makeshift splint and sat back. The rain drummed harder on the roof. After a long silence, she stirred again, whispering hoarsely, "Who are you?" "Name's Jack Turner," he said simply. "You were in a wreck. I found you on Highway 19. She blinked at him, confusion and pain clouding her gaze. "They were chasing me. I saw them kill—" She stopped, panic tightening her breath. Jack leaned closer. "You don't have to talk now." But she shook her head weakly. "You don't understand. They'll find me. They always do." Her eyes darted toward the window, wild and frightened. Jack followed her gaze into the storm. Lightning split the sky, revealing only sheets of rain and endless sand. Yet he knew the kind of fear she carried. It wasn't just of men with guns, but of power, of corruption, of something you couldn't fight alone. He looked back at her. "Who are they?" Her lips trembled. "Arms dealers, smugglers. I'm Emily Carter," she said finally. "I'm a nurse. I saw something I shouldn't have. They shot the man who tried to stop them. I ran." Jack's jaw tightened. He had heard that tone before. People who had seen death and survived it only by chance. "You're safe now," he said again, though part of him doubted it. Outside, thunder rumbled closer. Rex lay by the door, ears flicking, eyes on the window. Jack sat silently beside Emily, staring at the fire burning low in the stove. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in the storm. When she finally fell asleep, Jack stepped outside. The air was thick with rain. The desert transformed into a sea of mud and shadow. He lit a cigarette and watched the lightning trace the horizon. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something older. He thought of Sarah and Lily, their laughter swallowed by memory, and of the stranger now sleeping in his home. "Guess we're back in it, huh?" he murmured to Rex. The dog tilted his head, eyes gleaming faintly in the light. Jack exhaled smoke into the rain. He didn't know who these men were or why this woman had appeared like a ghost in the night. But he knew one thing. He couldn't turn his back. Not again. Not when someone needed saving. And somewhere out in the desert, beyond the reach of the storm, headlights moved slowly across the sand, searching. The storm had passed, but the desert still smelled of wet dust and smoke. Dawn crept slowly through the cracks in the boarded windows, brushing the old cabin with faint streaks of gold. Jack Turner sat by the small wood stove, the glow from an oil lamp casting long, restless shadows across the walls. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw fire, his wife's car burning, the explosion in Hellmand, the wreck from last night. The ghosts never really left. They just waited for silence. On the couch, Emily stirred beneath a wool blanket. Her face was pale but clean now, her arm properly set in a splint. Jack had changed her bandages and wrapped her wounds carefully. She blinked against the dim light, confusion flitting across her eyes before memory came rushing back. She sat up too quickly and winced. "Easy," Jack said, his gravel-deep voice steady but kind. "You're safe here. He was sitting with his elbows on his knees, still wearing his faded green military jacket. His face was unshaven, the rough stubble catching the light, making him look both rugged and tired beyond his years. Emily studied him for a long moment. "You were the one who pulled me out," she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse but clear. "Yes," he replied. "You were bleeding and your car was about to go up. You're lucky I was nearby." She smiled faintly, then frowned. "Lucky isn't the word I'd use. If they find me, they'll finish the job." Jack looked up, his gray eyes sharpening. "You said that last night. Who are they at exactly?" Emily hesitated, rubbing her bandaged wrist. "The man leading them, his name's Vince Marlowe, ex-army, dishonorably discharged. He runs a smuggling network, guns, ammo, sometimes worse. I worked at a mobile clinic 2 towns over. One night I saw them moving crates off military trucks into unmarked vans. They didn't notice me at first, but one of them did later. They killed my driver, chased me for miles." The name hit Jack like a body blow. He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. For a moment, the air seemed to thicken around him. Marlowe. The syllables carried 10 years of buried rage. He remembered the man, Captain Vince Marlowe, tall, square-jawed, a grin too polished for war. Back in Afghanistan, Marlowe had commanded a logistics unit, charismatic, calculating, the kind of officer who smiled for cameras but never got dirt on his boots. Jack had trusted him once, until a convoy ambush revealed Marlowe's deal with a black market broker. The betrayal had cost 3 Marines their lives and left Jack half buried under a collapsed ridge. Marlowe vanished before the court-martial ever began. Jack's jaw tightened, the muscle in his cheek flexing. "You're sure it's the same man?" he asked. Emily nodded. "Yes, he called one of his men by rank, Sergeant Pike. The others followed his orders like soldiers." Jack stood and paced slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots. Rex lifted his head from his spot by the door, ears alert. "Marlowe," Jack muttered again, the word low, bitter. "That son of a bitch should have been court-martialed, not running guns in my desert." Emily watched him carefully. Beneath the calm exterior, she saw something shifting, old fury waking up after years of sleep. "You know him," she said softly. Jack stopped pacing. His eyes met hers. "I served under him once. He got my men killed. I thought he was dead." For a long moment neither spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of the stove and the quiet hum of wind outside. Emily's expression softened. "Then maybe this is your chance to finish it," she said. Jack exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands over his face. "I walked away from that life for a reason. War doesn't end. It just changes address." He turned toward the window. Outside, the clouds were thinning, but the desert beyond looked endless, cruel, and waiting. Emily's voice trembled, but not from fear. "You saved me when you didn't have to. You could walk away again, but you won't, will you?" He looked back at her, and for the first time, there was something fragile in his eyes, something like pain turned into purpose. "No," he said quietly. "I won't." A faint scratching sound came from outside. Rex was already on his feet, his fur bristling. Jack's hand went to the old rifle leaning by the door. He stepped onto the porch, scanning the barren expanse. A figure was approaching on foot, half hidden by dust. The man was older, maybe late 50s, wearing a battered sheriff's coat and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen too many summers. His face was rugged, lined deep from years under the sun, his beard trimmed close but graying. His name was Sheriff Walt Hensley, and he'd been the law in this forgotten corner of Nevada for 3 decades. He walked with a limp, the result of a bullet wound from a meth bust gone wrong years ago. A wound that never fully healed and left him perpetually irritable. "Morning, Jack," Walt called out, stopping by the fence. His voice was gravel and bourbon. "Heard a storm rolled through last night. You all right?" Jack lowered his rifle slightly. "Yeah, took in a traveler who got caught in it." Walt's eyes narrowed. "That's so? I got reports of a car wreck down by Route 19. State police say there were bullet casings all over the scene. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Jack's silence was answer enough. The sheriff sighed, pulling off his hat. "I don't want trouble, Jack. Not again. You've done your time. But if the people chasing her come through here, they won't stop at questions. "I'll handle it," Jack said. His tone left no room for argument. Walt studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You always do." He replaced his hat and turned, back down the road. "Be careful. The desert keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its debts." When Jack returned inside, Emily was sitting up, her gaze anxious. "Who was that?" "An old friend," he said, "and a reminder that trouble doesn't stay buried forever." She looked down at her bandaged hands. "What will you do now?" Jack checked the rifle, loading a fresh round with slow precision. "What I should have done 10 years ago," he said. "Finish what Marlowe started." Rex's tail thumped once against the floor, as if in approval. Outside, the sun rose higher, turning the desert gold. Inside, under the soft glow of the oil lamp, two broken souls, one haunted by the past, one hunted by the present, found a fragile alliance in the quiet space between storms. Night fell hard and fast across the Nevada desert. The air was thick with the metallic scent of a coming sandstorm, and the horizon glowed faintly red, like a warning from the earth itself. Inside the cabin, the oil lamp burned low. Jack Turner sat at the table, cleaning his rifle with the slow precision of habit, while Emily slept in the small back room. Rex dozed near the door, one ear twitching at every distant sound. The silence felt stretched, like a thread ready to snap. Jack's mind was a storm of its own. The name Vince Marlowe had stirred something poisonous inside him. Old anger mixed with guilt. He thought about the 3 men who died under his command because Marlowe had sold intel to the enemy. He thought about Sarah and Lily, about how he'd promised never to let death follow him home again. But it had. It always did. The wind outside rose, sand scratching against the window panes like fingernails. Rex's head snapped up. His deep growl rolled through the room like distant thunder. Jack froze, hand tightening on the rifle. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Rex moved to the window, tail stiff, ears forward. Then Jack saw it. A flicker of light in the darkness, headlights cutting through the dust. One car, then another. He killed the lamp. The house dropped into darkness. "Emily," he called quietly. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, her dark hair loose around her pale face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Company," he said grimly. He handed her a pistol. "Stay low. Don't fire unless I tell you." Outside, engines idled. Men's voices carried over the wind, rough, confident, and cruel. Jack recognized that tone. Mercenaries, ex-military like himself. He eased open the back door and looked through the crack. 3 figures were approaching, flashlights cutting arcs through the sand. Another man stood by the truck, a tall figure with a black coat whipping in the wind. Even from this distance, Jack could feel the arrogance radiating off him. Dale Knox, he would later learn the name, a former sniper, mid-30s, lean and hard-edged. His blonde hair was cropped close, his skin weathered from years of desert work. He was Marlowe's field enforcer, known among mercenaries for never missing a target. Jack whispered, "They're coming in from the west. They'll flank the house." He turned to Rex. "Guard the back." The dog moved instantly, low and silent, disappearing into the shadows. Emily crouched near the stove, clutching the pistol, her breath fast and shallow. The first man kicked the front door open. Wood splintered, and a flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. Jack fired once. The shot was clean, precise. The man fell before he could shout. "Move!" A voice bellowed from outside. Bullets tore through the walls, showering the room with wood and dust. Emily ducked, her heart hammering. Jack rolled across the floor, firing short, controlled bursts. Through the broken window. Another man went down, but the third kept advancing, tossing something through the open doorway. Jack's eyes widened, a flashbang. He turned, shouting, "Down!" The grenade went off, a blinding white flare that threw him back against the wall. His ears rang, vision swimming. Through the haze, he saw Rex lunge from the back door. The German shepherd hit the intruder full force, knocking him into the mud. The man screamed as Rex's jaws clamped down on his arm. Jack staggered to his feet, aimed, and fired. The attacker went still, but there was no time to breathe. A low hum built outside, a spark, then a rush of heat. Jack's stomach dropped. "They're torching the place," he rasped. Flames licked up the wooden walls, crackling hungrily. Smoke filled the cabin. Emily coughed, eyes wide with terror. "Jack!" He grabbed her wrist. "We're leaving. Now!" He threw open the back door, but the fire was spreading fast, fed by the storm wind. Rex barked sharply, limping now. Jack saw blood on the dog's flank. His gut twisted. "Damn it!" He scooped the rifle over his shoulder and half carried Emily into the night, Rex limping behind them. The wind had turned savage. Sand whipped through the air in sheets, stinging their faces. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Emily clung to Jack's arm, her voice barely audible. "Where are we going?" "East Ridge," he shouted back. "There's an old mining tunnel." He knew the terrain like his own scars. The storm howled louder, erasing their tracks as soon as they formed. Behind them, the cabin was a pillar of fire swallowed by the sand. They stumbled through the darkness for what felt like hours, guided only by the faint light of the moon behind the storm clouds. Jack could feel Rex faltering, his breath coming in ragged bursts. He stopped, kneeling beside him. The dog's fur was slick with blood from a grazing bullet wound along his side. "Hang on, boy," Jack muttered, pressing a hand against the wound to slow the bleeding. Emily knelt beside them, tears cutting clean streaks through the dirt on her cheeks. "He saved me," she whispered. "He pushed me down before that shot." Jack nodded tightly. "That's what he does." He looked up at the shifting wall of sand ahead. "We can't stop here." They pushed on. Jack led, shielding Emily with his body as the storm screamed around them. Each step was a battle. The desert seemed alive, roaring, swallowing, testing their will. Jack's muscles burned, his lungs raw from grit, but he kept moving. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from the past. He was fighting for something real. When they finally reached the jagged mouth of the old mining tunnel, Jack turned one last time toward the blaze in the distance. The only home he'd ever known was gone, burned to ash. But beside him stood Emily, trembling, alive, and Rex, wounded but unbroken. He looked at them both, then back at the endless storm. "Come on," he said quietly. "We're not done yet." They disappeared into the darkness as the desert closed behind them, the storm erasing every trace they'd ever been there. The desert was silent again, but it was not peace. It was the silence that followed ruin. Jack Turner led Emily through the mouth of an abandoned mine shaft, his flashlight beam cutting through the thick air heavy with dust and the faint scent of rust. Behind them, Rex limped painfully, his side bandaged with a strip of torn cloth. The storm outside had faded to a low hum, sealing the world in this hollow of stone. The tunnel walls bore the scars of time and memory, and Jack knew them all. This place had once been his fallback post, part of a forgotten training network from his days as a Marine. Emily moved carefully beside him, her face pale but determined. The lantern light caught the streaks of dirt and sweat on her cheeks. "You've been here before," she said softly. "Years ago," Jack replied, his voice echoing off the stone. "When the Corps trained us for desert survival. We built these bunkers to hold out during storms, or worse." He didn't need to explain what worse meant. They entered a small chamber where the air was dry and still. A rusted table sat in one corner, surrounded by cracked storage crates and faded maps nailed to the wall. Jack set Rex down gently on an old blanket. The dog whimpered once, but stayed still, trusting his master completely. Emily knelt immediately beside him. Her training as a field nurse came alive, calm hands, focused eyes. She checked the wound, lifting the bandage carefully. "The bullet didn't go too deep," she murmured, more to herself than to Jack. "He's lucky." She poured antiseptic from Jack's old medical kit and cleaned the wound while Rex gritted through the pain with quiet loyalty. Jack watched, his hands clenching and unclenching. He had faced gunfire, death, and loss, but watching his dog bleed was a different kind of torture. "He saved you," he said quietly. Emily paused, looking up. "He saved us both." There was a small tremor in her voice, but also a spark of strength. Hours passed in the dim orange light of the lantern. Emily stayed by Rex's side, whispering softly to him until his breathing evened out. Jack, meanwhile, dug through old crates, unearthing relics of another life. Ammo boxes, flares, a tattered field map of the region, and a radio that might still work. Dust settled over everything like a shroud. He finally found what he was looking for, a folded dossier sealed in a plastic sleeve. Inside was a name, Vince Marlowe, stamped across a classified report, yellowed with age. Beneath it, old surveillance notes, suspected of illicit arms trading, contacts in Eastern Europe, connection to desert transport routes. Jack stared at it until his jaw tightened. Emily moved closer, the exhaustion in her face softened by curiosity. "You kept files on him?" she asked. "No," Jack said. "The Corps did. I just never stopped reading them." He smoothed the paper flat on the table. "This was from before he disappeared. I thought he'd vanished for good. Turns out he just went underground." "What now?" Emily asked. Jack studied the map spread before them. His finger traced a route across the desert toward a marked airfield near the state border. "Desert sky," he murmured. "Private runway. He's moving the weapons out from there." His eyes hardened. "If he gets those crates in the air, they'll end up in another war halfway across the world. I'm not letting that happen." Emily shook her head. "You can't do this alone. You're injured. Rex is hurt." Jack's voice turned cold but steady. "I've done worse with less." The words hung in the air like steel. From the back of the chamber came a faint static crackle. Jack turned sharply toward the radio. Against all odds, it had caught a weak transmission. Through the noise came a distorted voice. "Marlowe convoy. Loading operation begins at dawn. Repeat, Desert Sky Airfield." The rest dissolved into static. Jack turned to Emily. "That's our confirmation." She stood, anger flaring through her fear. "You said hour. You mean your plan, Jack. If you go there, you'll be walking into their base." "I know," he said simply. "That's the point." She stepped closer, her voice shaking now. "Then it's suicide." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the cabin burned. In her eyes, he saw the same fire that had once lived in his wife's. "Emily, you don't understand. If I don't stop him, more people die. This doesn't end with us hiding in a cave." Emily swallowed hard, her eyes glistening in the lantern light. "Then let me help you." He shook his head. "No, you help him." He nodded toward Rex. "He needs you more than I do." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with everything neither of them could say. Emily pressed a trembling hand against his chest, just for a second. "Don't do this out of guilt," she whispered. "Do it because you still believe in something." Jack managed a faint, weary smile. Maybe those are the same thing. Before dawn, he gathered his gear, rifle, knife, a small pack of supplies. He checked Rex one last time. The dog was awake now, eyes half open, watching him. Jack crouched beside him and rubbed his head gently. "Stay with her, buddy," he said softly. "You've done enough." But Rex's gaze followed him, ears twitching as Jack moved toward the tunnel exit. Emily stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself. "If you make it back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you'd better have a plan for what comes next." Jack turned slightly, the morning light breaking through the tunnel entrance and painting his silhouette in gold. "If I make it back," he said, "I'll start over." Then he disappeared into the dawn. Moments later, Rex let out a low, determined whine. Despite the pain in his side, he struggled to his feet. Emily tried to stop him, but the dog slipped past, limping toward the light. She called after him, her voice lost to the wind, and as the first rays of sunrise touched the desert floor, two figures, one man, one wounded dog, moved together toward the horizon, their shadows long and unbroken. The night hung heavy over the desert, cold and breathless. The ruins of old hangars and the skeletal outlines of rusted planes stood like silent witnesses under a dying moon. Jack Turner crouched behind a dune, 50 yards from the perimeter fence of Desert Sky Airfield. His clothes were covered in dust, his eyes narrow and sharp. Next to him, Rex crouched low, the faint scar along his side visible even in the dim light. The dog's breathing was steady, the pain ignored. They had come a long way, through storms, blood, and loss, to this place. This was where it would end. Through his binoculars, Jack saw the enemy. Trucks idled beside a large cargo plane, painted matte gray. Men in tactical gear moved with precision, loading long metal crates stamped with foreign serial codes. Near the plane's ramp stood Vince Marlowe. He looked older now, but still dangerous, a tall man in his early 50s, built like a soldier gone soft with money. His short-cropped brown hair was flecked with gray, and a faint scar bisected his left cheek, a mark of his violent past. He wore a black field jacket over desert camo pants and a sidearm strapped tight to his thigh. His expression was calm, cold, the face of a man who had long since forgotten the meaning of guilt. Beside him stood Dale Knox, his blond lieutenant, barking orders at the crew. A scar on Knox's chin caught the light as he turned toward the hangar door, where, to Jack's horror, a familiar figure was being dragged in. Emily. Her wrists were tied, her face bruised but defiant. Even under the floodlights, she met Marlowe's gaze without flinching. Jack's pulse quickened. She must have followed him from the bunker, or maybe Marlowe's men had caught her tracking his radio signal. Either way, she was here, and she was bait. He whispered to Rex, "Stay low, boy. We do this clean." The dog's ears flicked once in silent understanding. Jack cut through the fence with his knife, slipping into the shadows between parked trucks. He moved like smoke, silent, calculated, every step measured. The desert wind carried the faint hum of the engines, masking his approach. Inside the hangar, Marlowe paced slowly in front of Emily, hands clasped behind his back. "You should have stayed quiet, Miss Carter," he said, his voice smooth but venomous. "You saw something you weren't meant to see. That makes you a liability." Emily's voice was hoarse but steady. "You think you can erase what you've done? People will find out. They always do." Marlowe smiled thinly. "Not if they're all dead." Jack was already on the upper catwalk, watching from above. He spotted 4 guards on the floor, another 2 near the plane. He took a deep breath. One last mission. He signaled Rex, then dropped down silently behind a crate. Rex darted through the shadows, low and quick. His paws made no sound against the concrete. Jack waited until Marlowe turned away, then moved. A single, suppressed shot took down 1 guard. Another followed before the first body hit the floor. Chaos erupted. "We've got movement," Knox shouted, drawing his rifle. Emily dropped to the ground as bullets tore through the air. Jack rolled behind a metal drum, returning fire with deadly precision. The hangar echoed with the staccato rhythm of gunfire, shouts, and the thunder of engines. Rex launched himself at a guard aiming for Emily, teeth sinking deep into the man's forearm. "Jack!" she cried. He was already running toward her, sliding across the concrete to cut her restraints. "Can you move?" he asked. She nodded, grabbing a fallen pistol. "Then stay behind me." Knox advanced from the left, firing short bursts. Jack ducked behind a crate, counting the rhythm of shots, then rose, fired once, and Knox dropped, his rifle clattering across the floor. Marlowe cursed, retreating toward the plane's open ramp. "You should have stayed in your hole, Turner," he shouted, drawing his pistol. "I did," Jack growled back, "until you burned it down." Marlowe fired. Jack dove sideways, the bullet grazing his shoulder. Pain flared white-hot, but he kept moving. Rex lunged again, but Marlowe's second shot rang out, louder, closer. The dog yelped, the sound sharp and small. Jack turned in time to see Rex collapse, his body twisting mid-leap before hitting the ground. For a moment, the world stopped. The roar of engines faded, the wind died, and everything narrowed to that single sound, the silence that followed loyalty. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Marlowe raised his pistol again. "Always the hero," he sneered. But Jack was already moving. Rage and grief fused into focus. He charged forward, slamming into Marlowe with bone-breaking force. The gun went flying. They hit the floor, grappling, fists and fury colliding in raw violence. Marlowe was still strong, but Jack fought with something beyond strength. He fought for Rex, for Sarah, for every ghost that had ever followed him. Marlowe reached for a knife at his belt. Jack caught his wrist, twisted hard, and the blade clattered away. "You sold your men," Jack snarled, his hand tightening on Marlowe's throat. "Now you answer for them." With one final motion, he drove the man's head against the steel ramp. Marlowe went limp. Emily was at Jack's side in seconds, her hands shaking. "He's gone," she whispered. Jack didn't answer. He was already crawling to Rex. The dog's breathing was shallow but steady. Jack cradled his head, whispering through clenched teeth, "You stay with me, buddy. You hear me? You don't quit now." Sirens wailed in the distance. The sheriff's units, drawn by the gunfire. Floodlights swept across the airfield as vehicles rolled in. Sheriff Walt Hensley climbed out of the lead truck, shotgun in hand, his weathered face grim. "Jack!" he called. "You better tell me this is the end of it." Jack looked up, his voice low but steady. "It's over." 3 months later, the Nevada sun shone bright over a modest rescue center built from the remains of an old barn. The sign above the gate read, "Silver Creek Animal Haven." Inside, dogs barked and played in the dusty yard. Jack knelt beside one enclosure, tossing a ball to a fully healed Rex. The German Shepherd caught it easily, tail wagging, his once scarred body now strong again. Emily stepped out from the small clinic building, her hair tied back, a soft smile on her face. "You know," she said, leaning against the doorway, "he's got more fans than we do. People keep calling him the hero of the desert." Jack smiled faintly. "He earned it." He turned toward her, the light catching the faint lines around his eyes. "We all did." As the sun dipped behind the horizon, Jack watched Rex chase the ball again, alive, whole, unstoppable. For the first time in years, he felt the weight lift from his chest. The war inside him was finally over. In the quiet stillness of that Nevada morning, as sunlight spilled gently across the dusty yard of Silver Creek Animal Haven, it was clear that something greater had been at work all along. Jack Turner once believed his life was nothing but ashes, haunted by loss, guilt, and the ghosts of war. Yet, through the pain, through the storm, he discovered what many of us forget. Miracles don't always arrive with thunder or angels. Sometimes they come on 4 legs, with a loyal heart and eyes that never stop believing in you. Rex's courage, Emily's faith, and Jack's redemption were not coincidences. They were reminders that grace often hides within struggle. When life feels unbearable, when the night seems endless, remember that even in the darkest desert, God still paints a dawn. He places small miracles in our paths, people, moments, even animals, that lift us from despair and remind us that love never dies. It only transforms. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that faith can rise from ruins and that second chances are God's quiet miracles, share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment below and tell us how courage and kindness have changed your life. May God bless and protect everyone reading this. May He give you strength in your storms, light in your darkness, and a loyal guardian, on 2 legs or 4, to walk beside you always. If you believe in the power of love, redemption, and divine purpose, type Amen in the comments, share this story with your friends, and subscribe to our channel to keep spreading stories of faith, loyalty, and the miracles that walk among us.